I've always wanted to make this video, but I had to wait for Eternal to come out, and now I put enough time into the modern Doom games. I think it's time to share my thoughts on how well the modern Doom games go up against the classic games. Now, I understand both Doom games came from a different time. Classic Doom came out at a time when FPS games were relatively new, and there was a lot of stuff yet to be discovered as far as pushing the genre's boundaries. Modern Doom came out at a time when the genre is very popular, and there's been countless of FPS games have been made and inspired other FPS games. So it's going to be hard to discuss this topic. I'm mostly going to talk about the single player experience because that's what Doom has always been about. I thought about talking about other stuff like multiplayer and co-op, but I'm not going to include that in this video. I also thought about talking about Doom mods and Doom 2016 snap maps, but I'm going to save that for the next video because I have a separate idea for that. So let's get to it. I do think anyone who has watched my channel long enough should know I grew up playing the classic Doom games. Both the original Doom and Doom 2 were my childhood favorites. I played them so many times, I still do, and their games I really look up for inspiration when making stat maps for Doom 2016. The original Doom was so groundbreaking for its time, and to this day, I would still say it's an amazing game despite its old age. I always looked at the original Doom to be the very first FPS game that pretty much perfected single-player FPS gameplay or mechanics for its time. You have a wide range of weapons that all have their own uses and purpose, same thing with enemies, but Doom also added different types of environments rather than Wolfenstein 3D where you're pretty much stuck in an interior environment and pretty much going through a bunch of maze-like level layouts with different wall or brick textures. In Doom, you had both interior and exterior. You had varied tech-based environments, varied hellish environments, nukage, and more. There was so much, that Doom added to Wolfenstein's formula, and it simply made Wolfenstein 3D an obsolete game. I also grew up playing Wolfenstein 3D, but I can't say Wolfenstein 3D is a good game in today's time because it's simply a product of its time. There's been so many games that just added a lot of stuff to the genre where it's hard to go back to that game. And I always thought Doom was the first to quote-unquote kill Wolfenstein 3D, say. There's a real reason why there were so many Doom clones since its inception, and there are still modern games that are copying classic Doom formula like Iron Fury, Dusk, Proteus, and more to list. Classic Doom is a timeless game, and its formula is still an effective design. It just has this sense of simplicity to it, but it also has a lot of depth and meaningful design, whether it's the map layout, the weapons roll, the demons roll, and its replay value. There's just like a lot of stuff that makes, classic Doom feel so special, especially like it was made, at a time when people were still figuring out how to create that perfect formula for a single player FPS game. Now, modern Doom does take its cues from classic Doom, but I wouldn't say it's a straight up classic style shooter like classic Doom or all those games I mentioned, but just because it isn't a classic style shooter doesn't mean it's not good. You still got secrets to hunt for, and some of the maps are heavy of exploration, and it's a fast-paced style game too. Like, those are some of the stuff that I feel like are similar to modern Doom and classic Doom. Modern Doom is definitely not as groundbreaking as classic Doom, but it's an awesome reimagination for the series where it really feels like a reboot. So many mechanics that feel familiar to classic Doom, but it's also refreshing. For example, you fight an imp similarly in modern Doom versus classic Doom. You basically go up to an imp and kill it before it kills you, and you can also dodge its projectiles. But the fact that modern Doom has smarter AI does spice up the fights. I do feel like these modern Doom games have a heavier emphasis on making the AI smarter too, so the combat is always going to feel refreshing compared to classic Doom, where you can pretty much expect what the monsters will do in that game. The weapon mods do the same for the familiar weapons too, and Modern Doom is truly a great example of how you reimagined a beloved classic like the Doom series. And I always thought there's nothing wrong with what the current id Software has done with Doom, because I know some classic Doom players have mentioned certain mechanics or design choices that they weren't fans of, but I've always thought it was fine overall. Like I said about Modern Doom, it isn't as groundbreaking like the classic Doom games, and that's something I wished id could have focused more on, because there were these type of old school reboot style shooters before Doom 2016 or Eternal like Shadow Warrior 2013, Wolfenstein The New Order, or even Duke Nukem Forever can fit into that category too. Overall, my experience with both of these style games have been amazing, and as a long-time Doom fan, Modern Doom is on a great road, and it's taken with great care by the current id Software. I can definitely say Modern Doom is some of the best games I feel like you can play in current times, and I have stated Doom 2016 is a modern masterpiece, and I still have not changed my opinion on that. The game has so much great design and mechanics, lots of content, and there's just a lot of stuff you can do with that game. Eternal is also a great game too, and it's a worthy sequel to 2016. However, as someone who grew up on classic Doom and have always had a lot of sentimental value to those games, I much prefer classic Doom over modern Doom games. Like I said in this video, the design of classic Doom is timeless, and it's still a formula that can still work in today's time of gaming. I look up to the old Doom games for so much inspiration for the Doom 2016 maps I've made throughout the years, and I still come back to Doom 1 and 2 to this day, and I'm just talking about playing the regular and official maps. The user-generated maps is just the extra toppings, if you would say. They're games that's never going to get old for me, and I always come back and remember why I fell in love with them during my childhood when I first played them. So yeah, stay tuned for my next video on this subject, a continuation video where I talk about classic Doom mods and Doom snap maps as I compare them with the two and talk about quality and my experience with them. This is going to be an interesting topic because I don't think there's anyone that made a video where they compare the two user-generated experience as a whole, but I'll be doing it, and I hope you guys will be excited to hear what I have to say.